It's important to remember where you came from, the lessons you learned. They shape who you become more than you realize at the time.
I didn't always feel like a stranger to my child. There was a time when she couldn't sleep without holding my hand. I used to sit by her bed, humming softly until her eyelids became heavy. Back then the world felt small, just the two of us against everything. I worked long hours, sometimes at 2 jobs, but I always returned to her. I didn't have much money, but I made sure she never went hungry. I made her birthday cakes from scratch, sometimes staying up past midnight just to frost them before she awoke. But life doesn't stay simple forever. She grew, and with each passing year, the space between us seemed to widen. It started with little things, rolling her eyes when I reminded her to clean her room, closing her bedroom door more often, and spending more time with friends than with me. I told myself this was normal. Teenagers pull away. They come back eventually. At least, that's what I thought. There were moments when I saw something different in her eyes. It wasn't just annoyance, it was sharper, like resentment. It scared me, but I brushed it off. I told myself it was just a phase.
You don't lose sommeon no latence. You lose them slowly, piece by piece.
By the time you notice, they're already gone. The real distance began after I remarried. I thought I was providing us both with stability. My husband was kind to me, but she never truly accepted me. She said he was too strict and too serious. I told her she needed to respect him. Looking back, maybe I didn't listen enough to how she felt. But I was tired.
Tired of carrying everything alone.
I needed help. When you need help, you sometimes overlook the small warning signs just to keep moving. There were arguments about curfews, grades, and her friends. Sometimes she'd shout things I tried to convince myself she didn't mean, "You care more about him than me," or "You've ruined my life." Each time, I told myself she was just angry, that it would pass. But anger, if you feed it long enough, becomes something heavier. Something you can't lift. I kept trying to bridge the gap, cooking her favorite meals, asking about her day, and offering to drive her places. But each effort met with coldness. She started staying out later and barely speaking to me. When she did, her words hurt. I didn't realize how far apart we had grown until she told me flatly, "I can't wait to move out." My heart sank, but I told myself every family goes through this. I had no idea how wrong I was. After she finally moved out, the house felt too quiet. At first, I told myself it was just part of the process. Kids leave home and start their own lives. But she didn't just move out, she shut me out too. Calls went unanswered. Messages were left on read. The only time I saw her was in photos posted by our mutual friends, smiling at parties or on trips. I stared at those pictures, trying to find traces of the little girl I once knew. I told myself she was just busy. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about time, it was about choice. She didn't want me in her life. Then, months later, she invited me over. I was so happy, I baked cookies and wore my best dress. I thought maybe this was the start of fixing things. But when I arrived, the air felt tense. She barely looked at me. Her voice was flat. She told me I had hurt her in ways I didn't understand and that she needed boundaries. I tried to ask what I had done, but she just shook her head and told me it was too late to talk about it. I left her apartment feeling like I had been punched in the chest. It was about a year later when I received a message from her, short and cold. She said we needed to talk about some rules before I could visit her home again. My heart raced as I read the list she sent. No unannounced visits, no bringing gifts unless she approved, no talking about the past. I stared at my phone, reading the words over and over. This wasn't how family treated each other, was it? But I told myself I'd follow the rules if it meant I could see her. When I arrived, her face was polite but distant. We sat in her kitchen, talking about nothing, weather, work, groceries. Every word felt heavy, like we were strangers forced to sit together. Then, halfway through our tea, she mentioned something about keeping space. I smiled weakly, pretending to understand. But inside, I felt like I was balancing on a tightrope. One wrong step, and I'd lose her completely. The day it all fell apart seemed ordinary. I had stopped by to drop off some fresh bread I'd baked. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, her eyes were cold. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply. I baked you something, I said, holding out the bread. Her face tightened. I told you, no unannounced visits. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I just wanted to. She cut me off. Get out. Or I'll call the cops.
The word hit me like ice water. I stood there, frozen, maille en shaking.
For a moment, I thought she was joking. But her eyes told me she meant it. I placed the bread on the doorstep and whispered, I love you, before turning away. Walking back to my car, I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I sat in the driver's seat for nearly 10 minutes before I could start the engine. After that day, I didn't hear from her for weeks. I replayed that moment in my mind, trying to understand where it all went wrong. I thought about calling her, but the fear of hearing her cold voice again kept me silent.
The house felt entier d'un hiver.
I began talking to myself, just to fill the silence. Friends advised me to give her space, saying that she'd come around eventually. But each day without a message felt like proof that she wouldn't. One night, I went through old boxes of her childhood, drawings, letters, tiny shoes. I held a picture of her at 5 years old, smiling with frosting on her cheeks. I wondered how that sweet little girl had turned into someone who could shut me out so completely. I realized then that I was grieving, not for a death, but for a relationship that was still alive in the world but gone from my life. Weeks turned into months. I tried to distract myself, gardening, volunteering, even joining a book club. But no matter what I did, there was always an empty chair in my mind where she used to sit. I stopped baking bread because every time I did, I remembered that day at her door. Then one afternoon, I saw her by chance at the grocery store. My heart leapt when I spotted her in the cereal aisle, hair tied up like when she was younger. I hesitated, unsure if I should approach. But I told myself I couldn't just walk away. I called her name softly. She turned, and for a split second, her face lit up, then quickly closed again. Hi, she said, her voice polite but distant. I asked how she was, if she'd been eating well. She nodded, offering short answers. It felt like talking to a stranger who just happened to look like me. When I reached for a box of cereal on the top shelf, she quickly said, I have to go, and walked away. I stood there holding that cereal box, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and pulled something out. A few weeks later, I received a short text from her, "Happy birthday." That was all. No call, no visit, not even a question about how I was. I stared at it for a long time, torn between gratitude and heartbreak. I typed back, "Thank you, I miss you," but there was no reply.
I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone, willing it to light up again.
It didn't. That night, I dreamed she was small again, running into my arms after school. I could smell her hair, still sweet from the shampoo I used to buy. But when I woke, the bed was cold and empty. I realized I was holding on to someone who no longer existed, not because she had died, but because she had chosen to become someone without me. I started writing letters I never sent. Some were apologies, though I wasn't sure for what exactly. Others were just updates about my day, what flowers were blooming, what I cooked for dinner, what I wished we could share. I kept them in a box under my bed, telling myself maybe one day she'd want to read them. But deep down, I think I wrote them more for me than for her. They were my way of pretending she was still listening, somewhere. People told me to let go. They said, she'll come back when she's ready. But I've learned that some people don't come back. Sometimes the door you keep knocking on is never going to open, no matter how long you wait. One rainy afternoon, I received a phone call from an unknown number. My heart raced as I answered, hoping it might be her. Instead, it was a nurse from the local hospital. She said they had my daughter there, nothing serious, just a minor car accident.
I drove fast den issued after the rain, praying she'd want me there.
When I arrived, she was sitting up in bed, scrolling on her phone. Her eyes flicked up when she saw me. You didn't have to come, she said. I wanted to, I replied softly. We talked briefly. She told me she was fine, just shaken up. I offered to drive her home, but she said a friend was coming. As I left, I thought I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, softness maybe, but it vanished before I could be sure. After that hospital visit, I didn't hear from her again. It felt like a cycle I couldn't break, hope, then silence. I began to accept that my love for her would always be bigger than her love for me. Some nights, I prayed for her happiness, asking nothing in return. That became my peace, knowing I could love her quietly without demanding she love me in the same way.
One summer afternoon, heard a knock on the door.
When I opened it, she stood there with a bag of groceries. Thought I'd make dinner, she said casually, as if no years had passed between us. We cooked together like we used to, chopping vegetables, stirring soup, and talking about little things. She didn't explain why she came, and I didn't ask. I knew better than to push. That night, as we ate, I realized something important. I didn't need a dramatic reunion. I just needed moments like this, even if they were rare. Time has a way of softening sharp edges. Our relationship never went back to what it was, but it never disappeared completely. She came by now and then, sometimes for dinner, just to drop something off. Each time felt like a gift I didn't expect but was grateful for. Looking back, I see that love isn't always about closeness. Sometimes it's about patience. Sometimes it's about standing at a distance but still cheering for someone's happiness. I still remember the day she told me to get out. It's a scar I'll always carry. But scars don't mean the wound is still open, they show you've healed enough to keep going. And so I keep going. Loving her from wherever she'll let me stand.